Keanu Reeves walked into a quiet bar, hoping for a peaceful drink after a long day. But what happened next would shake the place to its core. A stranger, eager to prove his toughness, approached him with nothing but arrogance. What came next was a masterclass in control and discipline, as Keanu showed the crowd, and the world, what true strength really looks like. The man didn't stand a chance, but the lesson that followed was unforgettable. Stick around, because tomorrow we have another thrilling story for you, one filled with even more unexpected twists and revelations. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. The dim glow of neon lights flickered softly over the worn wooden tables of the bar, casting long shadows on the walls. The atmosphere was loud, brimming with the sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional burst of song from the karaoke machine in the corner. People were here to unwind, to forget the stresses of their day. No one expected that tonight the bar would witness something that would turn their evening upside down, something that would become the stuff of legends. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a simple leather jacket and jeans, sat alone at a corner booth, sipping a quiet drink. The tall, lean actor, known as much for his kindness as for his roles in action-packed films, was in town for a film premiere. He had always been the type to keep to himself, preferring quiet moments away from the spotlight. That night, he was just another man enjoying a drink after a long day of work. Unbeknownst to him, there was a man sitting 2 tables away who had noticed him immediately. "Aren't you that guy from those action movies?" the man thought, his eyes narrowing as he tried to place the face. He had seen Keanu in John Wick, The Matrix, and so many other films where the actor performed mind-boggling stunts. The stranger's mind raced. Was he really that tough in real life? Was he a fighter, or was it all just movie magic? The stranger was no movie buff, though. He was a self-proclaimed tough guy, a man who had spent years in the gym, who had built his ego on a foundation of being the alpha in any room he entered. He had a reputation to uphold, one of bravado and muscle. So, when his eyes met Keanu's across the room, something in him snapped. The idea that this calm, serene figure had ever been in a real fight was laughable. In his mind, he saw himself as the bigger, tougher man. Keanu was just an actor. What could he possibly know about real combat? Fueled by liquid courage and arrogance, the stranger stood up, approaching Keanu's table. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. He cracked his knuckles as he walked, making sure Keanu could see him. The crowd around them seemed to quiet, sensing the tension in the air. Keanu looked up, his expression neutral but calm. He had learned long ago to be aware of his surroundings, especially in a place like this. But he had never been the kind of man to start trouble. The stranger's voice cut through the air, loud and filled with bravado. "You think you're tough, huh? Like in those movies?" He sneered, his words dripping with mockery. "I don't believe it. I think you're just a joke." Keanu didn't flinch. He simply set his drink down on the table, still maintaining eye contact with the man. "I don't want trouble," he said softly. "I'm just here to have a drink." But the stranger wasn't having it. He stepped closer, his chest puffed out. "No, you're gonna show me what you've got. Let's see if all that martial arts stuff is for real." The crowd, sensing the tension in the air, began to gather around them. Phones came out. People whispered, trying to get the best angle for the inevitable confrontation. The man was practically daring Keanu to respond, his fingers twitching as if he was already imagining himself throwing the first punch. He thought he had the upper hand. He was bigger, stronger, and he had been in plenty of fights before. Keanu took a deep breath, his body remaining still. He hadn't moved an inch, but his eyes were now locked onto the stranger's with an intensity that seemed to cut through the noise of the bar. His calmness only seemed to fuel the stranger's anger. With a sudden roar, the man lunged forward, swinging a heavy fist toward Keanu's face. It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. Keanu moved, not fast, but with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering discipline. His hand reached out, effortlessly deflecting the punch, redirecting the force just enough to leave the man off balance. The room seemed to freeze for a second. The man's eyes widened in shock. Before the stranger could recover, Keanu was already moving again. His foot swept low, sending the man stumbling backwards, his body crashing into a nearby chair. There was no rage in Keanu's movements, no fury. Just perfect technique. The crowd, now completely silent except for the hum of phones recording the scene, watched in disbelief. The man tried to charge again, but Keanu sidestepped him with the grace of a dancer. With a quick jab to the man's midsection, Keanu pushed him back, his body language as calm and controlled as ever. It wasn't a fight anymore, it was a demonstration. Keanu wasn't fighting to win, he was showing the stranger, and everyone watching, the difference between true skill and raw aggression. The man was out of his element, and it was becoming painfully clear. The stranger, now winded and humiliated, took a step back, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. His bravado had evaporated. The crowd had seen the truth. The man wasn't a fighter, he was a man pretending to be one. Keanu took a slow, deliberate step toward him, his expression still calm, yet there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. He spoke softly, almost too quietly for anyone to hear, but the crowd was still hanging on every word. Strength isn't about being bigger or tougher. It's about knowing when to fight, and when to walk away. The man stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. His pride was shattered. His ego was destroyed in front of a crowd that had now turned their full attention to him, not with fear, but with pity. He knew he'd lost, not just the fight, but his dignity. His shoulders slumped, and without another word, he turned and walked away, his head down. The bar was silent for a long moment before the hum of chatter slowly started to fill the space again. People were still talking, but not about the fight. They were talking about what they had just witnessed. Keanu's calm, collected response had turned the situation from a potential brawl into a master class in composure and skill. Keanu sat back down at his booth, picked up his drink, and took a slow sip. The noise of the bar returned, but now there was a sense of awe, even reverence, in the air. People gathered around him, still recording, still in shock. But Keanu simply nodded, his smile small and humble, as if to say that he didn't need anyone's praise. He didn't do it for the crowd. He did it to show the man who challenged him, and the world watching, that true strength wasn't in confrontation, it was in control, discipline, and the ability to walk away without a fight. As the night wore on, the story of the stranger's failed challenge to Keanu Reeves spread throughout the city. But more than the spectacle, it became a lesson, a reminder that strength was not about throwing punches. It was about knowing when to fight and, perhaps more importantly, when to rise above. In the end, Keanu didn't need to prove anything. He had shown everyone the most important lesson of all. True strength lies in the ability to remain calm and composed, no matter the circumstances. As the crowd slowly dispersed, still buzzing with excitement, Keanu remained in his booth, unfazed by the attention. People approached him, some for autographs, others simply to express their admiration. But Keanu greeted them all with the same serene smile he had shown earlier, as if the entire altercation had been nothing more than a passing moment in his day. One of the patrons, a young woman, approached him hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want to say thank you. What you did back there, it was incredible. You didn't just stop him. You taught us all something. About patience. About strength. I think you helped that guy more than you realize. Keanu looked up at her, his eyes soft and kind. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is show restraint, he said, his voice quiet yet full of meaning. But it's the most important thing. Not every battle needs to be fought. The woman smiled, nodding slowly, as if she had just absorbed something profound. She lingered for a moment longer, then turned to leave, her phone already in hand, ready to share what she had witnessed with the world. Keanu, however, didn't need the viral moment. His calmness had spoken louder than any social media post ever could. Outside, the evening had deepened into night. The bar's neon lights cast a soft glow across the street, but the streets themselves seemed quieter, as if the entire neighborhood had absorbed the energy of what had just occurred. For the people who had been there, that night wouldn't be remembered just as a night out. It would be remembered as the night Keanu Reeves showed the world what it truly meant to be strong. Meanwhile, the stranger, now nursing a bruised ego, wandered the streets. He had been humiliated, and he knew it. His mind kept replaying Keanu's movements, how effortlessly the actor had disarmed him, how the crowd had reacted to his pitiful attempt to assert dominance. It stung deeply. He had thought he was the big man, the tough guy in the room. But in that instant, Keanu had shown him that real strength didn't need to be proven. It just was. Back in the bar, the employees, too, had witnessed the entire exchange, and their reactions were just as mixed. Some were in awe, while others were embarrassed by the scene. But as the night continued, a quiet shift began to happen. They started to understand something, too. Keanu had never once raised his voice or lost his cool. He had taken a moment that could have easily escalated into violence, and turned it into a lesson in restraint, in true strength. A bartender, a young man named Marco, leaned over to his colleague and whispered, "You know, I think I've learned more about fighting in the last 5 minutes than I have in years of watching people throw punches. That guy, Keanu, I don't think he needs to prove anything to anyone. He just is." His colleague nodded, still processing what had happened. "It's like he didn't even try to fight. He just controlled the whole thing." Keanu had left the bar just after the incident, his calm demeanor not even hinting at the stir he had caused. But for everyone who had been there, the impact was lasting. The strange sense of peace he exuded had left behind more than just a memory of a confrontation. It had left them with a reflection on themselves. In the days that followed, the story continued to spread, gaining traction on social media and news outlets. But it wasn't just the spectacle that kept people talking, it was the way Keanu had handled the situation. In a world where bravado, ego, and physicality often dominated the narrative, Keanu's response was a quiet rebellion. The footage of the altercation went viral, not because of the fight itself, but because of the way the actor had stepped back, stayed centered, and turned a moment of conflict into an opportunity for growth, for him, for the stranger, and for everyone watching. As the weeks passed, the incident became the subject of conversations everywhere. People in gyms, coffee shops, and offices discussed Keanu's mastery of the situation, but the real takeaway wasn't just about martial arts. It was about the inner discipline it took to remain calm, no matter the provocation. It was about strength, not as a display, but as a quiet, powerful force that radiated from within. Back in the bar, Marco, the bartender, had started practicing a different kind of strength. He'd always been a little quick to anger, a little quick to defend his pride, but after witnessing Keanu's composure, he found himself pausing more often, thinking before reacting. What would Keanu do? He'd asked himself, before answering a rude customer or dealing with a situation that would normally have sent him over the edge. As for the stranger who had tried to pick a fight with Keanu, he spent many nights replaying the encounter in his mind. He had told himself for so long that it was about strength, about proving himself in front of others, but Keanu had shown him how little that mattered. The stranger eventually disappeared from the local bar scene, his pride too bruised to ever show his face again in the same way. Whether he ever understood the true lesson of that night was unclear, but one thing was certain: he would never forget what happened. Keanu's actions, quiet and composed, had affected more than just those who were there in person. People from all over the world watched the videos, read the stories, and took away the message that strength isn't in fighting, it's in knowing when to walk away, when to stay calm, and when to rise above petty conflict. For Keanu Reeves, it was just another night in the life of a man who, without even trying, had shown everyone what it truly meant to be a hero, not on a screen, but in real life. And as for the bar, it had never felt more peaceful. People still came, still partied, still celebrated the little moments of their lives. But deep down, they all carried with them a reminder from that night. A reminder that the real strength of a person is not measured by the size of their muscles, the flash of their bravado, or the noise they make. It's measured by the quiet way they stand in the face of adversity and choose to show the world what true power really looks like. Keanu had shown them that. As time passed, the story of Keanu Reeves and the bar altercation continued to ripple through the community, its impact far-reaching. The local bar, once a place of loud music and drunken bravado, had slowly transformed into something different, a sanctuary of sorts. People came not just to drink, but to reflect, to talk about strength in a new light. Regulars who once believed that aggression was the answer to every slight now found themselves in deeper conversations, asking themselves the important questions: what is real strength? What does it mean to fight for something? Marco, the bartender who had been so struck by Keanu's composure, had become a different person altogether. He had started training in martial arts, not out of a desire to become a fighter, but to learn the discipline that Keanu had displayed so effortlessly. And while he never sought the same viral moment or attention Keanu had garnered, Marco quietly took on the role of a guide in his own right, showing others that true strength wasn't about dominance. It was about self-control, humility, and knowing when to let go. The patrons who had witnessed the event became part of a community that now, in hindsight, seemed more cohesive than before. They spoke of the incident not as a spectacle, but as a lesson in emotional intelligence: how to stay grounded, how to be firm without being forceful, how to stand tall without needing to prove anything. Many of them found themselves changing their own behaviors, letting go of the old ways of reacting impulsively to life's challenges. Even the stranger who had tried to fight Keanu started to make his rounds again in the bar, though with a very different energy. He was no longer the brash figure looking to pick a fight. Instead, he began talking to people, listening, even apologizing. His transformation wasn't immediate, but there was a quiet acknowledgement of the power of that night, the realization that his ego had been wounded not by Keanu's martial arts, but by his own insecurities. His path forward was uncertain, but in time, he, too, became part of the unspoken lesson Keanu had left behind. Keanu, for his part, never returned to the bar. He never sought out the attention or validation others might have craved after such a public moment. To him, it had simply been another encounter, another opportunity to live with integrity. And that was enough. The video of the fight, if it could even be called that, continued to circulate online. It became a source of inspiration for many who watched it, not for the physical prowess Keanu had displayed, but for the internal calm he maintained through the entire encounter. Some people turned it into a meme, others posted it alongside motivational quotes, but the core of the message remained unchanged: strength is not just in what you do, it's in who you are. Eventually, the incident became part of Keanu's legacy, but in a way that was deeply personal and intimate, rather than commercial or performative. The act of walking away, of using restraint rather than violence, stood as a testament to the kind of man he was, a man who, despite the fame, despite the expectations of a world that constantly asked him to be larger than life, remained humble, grounded, and true to himself. As the years went by, people in that bar often found themselves asking, what would Keanu do? It became a phrase that echoed in moments of frustration or anger, a way to pause, breathe, and think. That night had started as a confrontation, but it had ended as a lesson in humanity, one that lingered far longer than any fight ever could. And in the end, that was the true power of Keanu's actions. Not just the fight he avoided, but the change he sparked in others. Through one quiet moment, a lesson about strength, humility, and inner peace had resonated with everyone who witnessed it, leaving behind a legacy that was as subtle as it was profound. Keanu Reeves, once again, had proven that the most powerful thing a person can do is not to conquer others, but to conquer themselves. If this story touched your heart, we've got many more that will do the same. Click the screen to discover more tales of hope, compassion, and resilience that will inspire you.